Hello and welcome to Building SaaS on AWS, the AWS SaaS Factory show for builders of SaaS here on Twitch. My name is Anthony McClure, and I am a solutions architect with the AWS SaaS Factory and your host for today's show. If you are currently a builder of software as a service solutions or are just beginning to learn how to design, build, deploy applications into multi-tenant environments, then this is the show for you. With every episode, we strive to bring you subject matter experts in the various different aspects of SaaS and dive deep into those topics with you. And today, of course, is no exception. On today's show, we'll be taking a look at observability and specifically tool sets in Amazon QuickSight and Amazon QuickSight Q. Not necessarily the first services that you normally think about when we start to talk about SaaS and observability, but interesting nonetheless, and I think you will like what these services have to offer to you at the end of the day. But before we jump into that, I first want to say a big hello to everybody that is joining us today here live on Twitch. If you are joining and hanging out with us, please be sure to give a comment in the comment section. Tell us maybe a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and be sure to say hello to Mr. Bill Tarr, who is once again acting as our moderator for today. So to all of you, welcome and excited to get started. So let's go ahead and bring in our guest for the day. I would like to welcome Mr. Nicody Keating from our good friends at SaaS Competency Partner Trek 10. Nicody, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So my name is Nicody Keating.
Getting a weird thing on your mic.
All right, it should be back.
There we go. You're better. You're better.
All right.
You're good. Yes.
My name is Nicody Keating. I am with Trek 10. I'm the Alliance and Innovation Strategy Leader here. And what we do is we focus on helping businesses monetize on AWS. So when we come into a customer, we're not only looking at what's the project that is a technical project, we're looking at how to connect that project back to revenue. And the more that we can do that, the more we can help companies really realize the value of the cloud and help them achieve that promise of everything that you build goes back to your profitability, goes back to paying back that investment that gets put into the technology itself. And one of the areas that is oftentimes an afterthought that we've seen is around analytics, and especially QuickSight Q, because when you dive into the AWS ecosystem, there's so many great tools out there. And for a lot of builders, I want to piece together all these Lego pieces and like make amazing systems, especially in SaaS. And then you have QuickSight come along, and QuickSight is a little bit different. It's kind of an analytics product versus a small building block. Mm-hmm. But the challenge there is that it still is a building block. It just doesn't present itself as such. And so the question that QuickSight Q, at least for me, is the answer to is, how do we make it so that our business sides of our companies can innovate faster, unlimited by our technology sides? Absolutely. And some of that innovation is communication, communicating back to the customer information that is critical to running their businesses, and spending time like understanding those messages, understanding how to position the information that's being gathered back to the customer can be rather challenging and needs a lot of depth into the ins and outs of how those businesses operate. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you've ever been in a lot of those meetings where it's like, hey, we have this business capability that we need the technical teams to have. You're sitting in those meetings for hours trying to just like understand, hey, what is it that you want?
Right.
And after all of that, you like finally get down to like building something. You build something, then you have to go back and check with them. And they're like, oh no, this isn't what we wanted.
Right.
Like, this is what we told you, but really we need this other thing. This doesn't work.
Certainly been there before.
Yeah, QuickSight Q is kind of my answer to that. And like, yeah, there's a little bit of training that goes into like helping the business side help themselves. But a lot of the tooling, a lot of the things that they would do in QuickSight Q, they've already learned about in things like Excel and Google
Hmm,
Sheets in terms of
interesting.
like how to graph out, how to chart, how to think about presenting data. And so I'd love to dive in, but do you have any questions before we dive in deep?
I've got a few actually, and again, if you anybody in the comments as well, if you have any questions about the tooling that we're talking about here or things related to SaaS, please feel free to add those into a comments, and we'll try and answer those as soon as we can as well. But yeah, first of all, again, obviously metrics and analytics, it's a huge component of what makes up well architected SaaS. We at the SaaS Factory talk
Mhm.
about this quite a bit. I think you're right, though, in many cases, although businesses understand that they need to have metrics and analytics as a part of their SaaS solutions, it's oftentimes this kind of thing that we know we need to do, but we'll get to it once we get an actual product put together, right? It's kind of this
Yeah.
afterthought that comes along later. And as much as we try to make it a first, a first principles sort of piece, is this well architected solution, it oftentimes is put by the wayside. And but that being said, QuickSight in and of itself is, again, it's not the first service that we usually think about, when we're talking about metrics and analytics specifically in SaaS. So
Mhm.
how did you ultimately connect those dots together and start using this as a part of your practice when working with your customers?
Yeah. So I was working on a project where we needed a couple of things. First, we needed multi-tenancy of data. We needed an analytics front end. We needed to build out the reporting backends, and we needed these reports to be able to be used across iPhones, the web browser, and various other like types of devices.
Devices. A
And
multi-device strategy, so to speak. Yeah.
yeah, and so looking at it, it's like, okay, well, this is going to be a lot of work.
Hmm.
Um, and on top of that, the number of people who are going to be actually looking at the analytics, and this is one of the qualifying pieces right now when I look at QuickSight use cases, is how is it being used inside the product? The number of people looking at the analytics was going to be a small fraction of the overall number of people using the product. And so when you have that type of system, QuickSight opens up the door to a lot of those pieces being implemented for you. So being able to isolate customers' data to those customers and maintain that isolation is no longer a piece of software that you have to write with QuickSight. QuickSight has a reporting API. So if you need to be able to go up, pull down reports, pull down information in a paged mechanism,
Hmm. Right.
it has that API for you. So you don't have to rebuild that. It has the
Hmm.
authentication and granting access like interfaces so that you can do that on your back ends, feed it in, and not have to worry about like how do I make sure that my data isolation stays present. You have the ability to have tiered access. So you could have your central administrator who has access to everything and then branch off sub access to other people, which is another thing that you don't have to build. And so
Hmm.
looking at this, we actually, for this particular company, as we are diving in, looking at the numbers, looking at how much they're going to spend, we saved them $500,000
Wow.
on implementation costs. So that's cost for like people like myself going in and actually writing the code. We saved $500,000 to get them up and running, and we made it possible for their business side to then quickly pivot on the information that they were showing to their customers so that they could come up with new dashboards. They could come up with they could take their ideas, turn in reality, get it to the customer extremely quickly without having to have extra meetings, which was another value, another
Hmm.
cost savings for them. allowing them to move even faster. So, and it really just comes down to how much effort do you have to put into building up your analytics, and how much value can you get out of it. And when you start diving into those pieces, it gets rather interesting. And some of the areas that Trek 10 focuses in on is retail and financial services.
Mm-hmm.
For financial service SaaS companies, financial service companies are willing to pay a lot for analytics. And it's not that the analytics are going to be used constantly. It's that the having access to go in and like dive into some of the analytics, dive into some of the usage of the system, for example, is extremely valuable from a compliance standpoint. And so
To be able
having a mechanism,
to be able to dig, you mean to be able to dig deeper than just the initial analytics or the canned reports, things like that, to go further than that.
Even having the canned reports, but like having the ability on top of that to say, okay, well, you have this base level of access, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we're going to give you analytics. It's going to cost you $10 per user per month. So we're going to make a QuickSight, from a billing perspective, will charge up to $5 per user. So if you're charging $10 per user, you're making $5 per month more, in the worst case scenario. And it's not a flat $5. It's actually it's a couple of cents per session that user has, up to $5. So it's a cap. So we're going to start charging $10. We're making at the very least a $5 margin on analytics, which kind of helps pay for the people to like go in there and make sure the data is being ingested, that sort of stuff. And then on top of that, we're going to offer our customers the ability for them to have access to specific data sets so that they can put together their own dashboard. And we're going to charge them like $200 per user for that.
Mm-hmm.
From a development standpoint, I don't have to build anything new for that.
So pretty much all of that comes out of the box as far as the offering is, from Amazon directly.
Correct. And so suddenly, like, I'm getting a lot of a lot of capabilities that customers would be willing to pay for that I don't have to build. All I'm doing is granting them access based off of the amount that they're paying me, which isn't a bad business model.
Yeah, no, that sounds really, really enticing, actually, and pretty incredible, assuming that it all works, right? So,
yeah,
maybe this is a good time, especially because there are some folks that may be with us or looking here that have never really even seen QuickSight in action and what it can do, and QuickSight Q, especially because the new features in Q, giving us that generative AI capability, is really impressive as well. So I think, Nakota, you have some stuff you'd like to show us?
Yeah. And so what we're going to be showing is we took a look at retail, and part of our retail story that we're telling here is around what is the actual cost to a company of stockouts, or of when you have stock in a store, you've sold all the stock of a specific type, and now you're at zero. So you can no longer sell that stock. What's that cost? And so what we've done is we went in and we took in two different data sources. One was the inventory coming into the store, and one was the POS information around the sales out of the store. And in there, we also have a third piece of data that we kind of made up based off of sales, which is how often is the shelf being replenished. And so what we're able to do is we're able to use trends and have QuickSight use trends in order to come up with how much money are we not getting from inventory being sold out, where are we seeing that lost revenue. And so to do this, we went in and we put together a cloud formation, but we put together three different main data sets. And the way that Q works is you have data sets which connect up to your data sources. And for this one, we're using TimeStream. Here we have some S3 data. And the reason why we're using S3 is just because this information, we just wanted a quick way to load up some fairly static information.
Mhm.
And so we're able to load that up directly from S3 into data sets. And when you come into the data set, you're able to join across these various data sources and create larger sets of data based off of relationships between these data sources in the same way you do it in SQL. You're also able to have fairly complex queries. And so this one's fun. What it's doing is it's going through TimeStream and having TimeStream estimate, or not estimate, but find out what the current inventory level is for the current month based off of
Interesting.
the
Like
latest data
past
coming
history.
in.
Oh, right.
Well, and it's running history, right? So you have this like running total that's going along. It's not accumulative, meaning that we're not adding and subtracting from a total inventory. What it is all of the little transactions.
Mhm.
And so it's taking that and pulling together like what's the current look of the inventory. And that's what we're storing in this current inventory data set.
So that's
We have
pretty
things like-
impressive just out of the box, right? So here we have data that already existed for this particular customer, right? They have this information that exists. Then they have some non-structured data as well. In the case of some of this data that exists, let's say maybe in S3, like you have here, they're completely separate from each other. You know, they're not related in any way, in two completely different technologies in this case. And by using this tooling capability in QuickSight, you've been able to merge that data together and then doing some querying magic, get the information that you're looking for.
Correct. And part of this is like I'm showing you this through the user interface, but we can come into Visual Studio Code, come into CDK, and we have constructs that we can put together based off a little bit of information as to how we're identifying this information, where we're importing it into. And Spice, by the way, this is QuickSight's storage mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Spice is a really good way to gain even more capabilities for your system, such as if you wanted to do projections on data, you don't need to build up an AI yourself. You don't need to do a lot of work on terms of like trying to figure out how to pull together a projection system. Let me actually just come right here. You can come in, gotta come right up to my purchase analytics because I played around with this a little bit the other day. You can come in, you throw the data into Spice, and then you can tell QuickSight, I want to do projections based on this amount. It'll do forecasting for you.
Oh, interesting.
Using Amazon Forecast. So it's not that you actually have to have these capabilities yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually start using the Amazon ecosystem behind the scenes to help you out there.
And QuickSight is just handling all that communication, working with
SageMaker,
working with Forecast and through SageMaker to actually do these things for you. Nice.
Correct. And so Spice is definitely your friend. You have the ability to like define what the data types coming in are, put in SQL or SQL-like queries, and really let me just flip over to this one. Really, when you look at QuickSight, you have the ability to hook up to all sorts of different data sources in the AWS ecosystem. And even you can hook up to Snowflake if you wanted to. But all of these data sources you can pull in You can leverage QuickSight to cache the information so you're not hitting your data sources all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're offloading that, which allows everything else to scale. And then you're leveraging QuickSight's ability to scale at the same time for your customers. And one of the interesting areas to me, especially for SaaS, is this piece right here around permissions. And so when I first started diving into QuickSight and the permissions approach for QuickSight, I got really concerned because it's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be complex. I'm going to have to use all sorts of
it's a new thing, right? It's a separate user management solution than what folks may be used to.
Yeah. And then I found out that all you're really doing is you're creating QuickSight groups. And so inside of the QuickSight console, and you can do this through CDK as well, but it's a little bit easier to just show in the console. In the console, you have managed groups. Inside these managed groups, you have users. And these can be added dynamically. And this one right here is based off of an IAM role. And so you can associate users from IAM roles, which works out really well when you look at things like Cognito.
Yeah, from a multi-tenancy perspective as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and generating a role / session and credentials for that session, you can leverage that here.
Interesting.
To then connect people up with the groups that they're supposed to be a part of. So this starts working to your advantage. On top of that, the idea here is that you have the group, you have the column that you want to restrict, and then you have a comma delimited list of what they should have access to. And so these are store IDs.
Okay.
And so if I come back over to our little QuickSight dashboard that we have, we'll go back out here, come to dashboards, come here. So we have our QuickSight dashboard. Right now we have 3 stores. These 3 stores match up with
those
these 3 IDs. So if I wanted to add another store, I come here, put a comma in. I'm going to go off to my handy dandy spreadsheet, try to grab a store that we should have a little bit of data. Actually, let me come down here because this will be a better way to do it. I'm going to come down here, grab a store that has a little bit of data. This is my handy dandy simulation list. We're going to save that. And then we're going to go ahead and upload this data up to S3. So we have the data in S3.
You just push that CSV to S3 at this point, and I assume that is set up as a data set and a data source, right? Yeah, that's that restriction.
So now we come right here to data set restrictions, and I'm going to just forcibly refresh that data set. Now, you can set this up so it's live. So let's say you had a data set that existed in RDS. You were okay with QuickSight reaching out to RDS every single time it wanted to use that data set. You can set it up with that live connection.
But for this data that doesn't change often, it makes sense to just have a copy of the data and update it when necessary. Yeah.
All right. So now it's been pulled in. We come over here, we refresh. And now we have our 4th store.
So just to recap that then, because I think this is really important. So we have a user, let's say, that is authenticated via Cognito. That is then associated with an IAM group. And then that group is then listed inside of the spreadsheet that you showed there. And from there, we can restrict access for that particular group to a certain column of data in this case, which would be very similar to like the tenant ID, that we talk about under most SaaS circumstances. So when that user is authenticated and looking at the dashboard here, because they're authenticated with that user, they see only those stores that are appropriate for this user. Is that correct?
Or let's take it a step further, right? So you have that tenant ID, and then let's say you have, like, in this case, a retail chain. So you have corporate that's supposed to see all the data for their tenancy.
So they would be a different group for a different IAM group for those folks, right? Yes.
Correct. Then you have the store manager who just sees their stuff, and being able to leverage this approach to grant those different levels access to only the information they should have access to becomes a very simple way to manage multi-tenant information.
Interesting. Yeah. So you get your tenant isolation, you get your data isolation, but you're just using these mechanisms that are already built into QuickSight in order to make that happen. We didn't have to write any code really to make that happen, other than the CDK that you have to get all this up and running, and that one spreadsheet file to match the stores up to the IAM group, essentially.
So here's the other fun part, is you can not only use the built-in capabilities here, but let's just say that you wanted to allow for store inventory. So you have a very specific use case, and the visuals are extremely custom.
Yeah.
So this would be a store layout, and I want to be able to switch back and forth in between inventory. Have that go, pull up the store image, show where the inventory is in the back, show where it's going to, show how the inventory is supposed to be prepared. And there's a better image for this. How the inventory is supposed to be prepared, and then how the inventory is supposed to look on the shelf.
That's very neat.
In this case, what I'm able to do is I'm able to take QuickSight and I'm able to have it call out to an API.
So that's where these images are being stored or sent from. This is not data that was in those data sets that you showed earlier. This is
no.
This
and
is
so
an
what
API
I did
call.
was I wrote some lambdas that would go retrieve the images from S3, turn them into base 64 images, and then just embed them in HTML, and then drop some squares and circles for me to like show where the inventory is, where it's going to, and then I just return that back to the customer. And since
QuickSight just sees it as an image, right? QuickSight just sees it as an image as far as the data flow.
Well, it sees it as HTML coming in, which it knows how to render, which is
even better,
kind of awesome. Yeah. Which opens up the door for you to have embedded forms, or to have things that interact through API to the rest of your SaaS solution.
Very cool.
Which is kind of nice. And so the fact that I'm able to serve this information up via Lambda makes it possible for me to like also point at, for example, web servers who I'm already authenticated to pull up some of that information or to use those forms as well. But all of this can fit together fairly seamlessly and simply for your business side, just to be able, hey, I want to pull up this information, give me the URL that I should be pointing at. And that URL can even be modified. Let me show you that. So if I come in,
so you do like a parameterized URL, basically.
Correct. And so I'm going to just come over here. I'm going to go ahead and click edit on here. Custom content. Here's my parameterized URL. And here's the pieces where I can pull in parameters that are stored in QuickSight and just pass those to that API or to that web front end.
So with this, I mean, you really have almost infinite extensibility, right? Because you can, as long as you can return HTML that can be rendered from an API call, you can extend this in any way that you would want to.
Correct. And the fact that, like, let's say, for example, the store map, they find out that this is in the wrong spot. Like, it really should be after how the inventory is displayed. Your business team can come in here, drag it, drop it,
Building their
get
own
it looking how they
report, their own
want.
dashboards. Yeah,
Yeah. And then publish it.
nice.
Which means all those meetings where you're just sitting around trying to like figure out like, how do we document what we want the engineers to put together?
Right.
And they can even test it here. Like I can come in here and say, okay, well, let's pull up this one store. And I want to pull up that information. This is how it's going to look. Like they can
you can
try
see
it
it
out.
live in real. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's not what you like, change it. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it moves a lot of that. It shifts a lot of that, overheaded burden that normally would have to be instructional, right, from the analyst, from the business team, ultimately making it way to the development team, to the IT team to actually make these changes. And then, like you said, more than likely what happens, right, is that once the result is actually produced and we have something to show, then there are going to be changes. Oh, well, that's not what I really wanted. What I really wanted was X, even though I told you Y. I mean, we've all been there before. This way, business users can just utilize the tool in and of itself. And I mean, anybody that's worked with a business intelligence tool before, these kinds of things look really familiar. Right. As far as putting together reports and whatnot. So a lot of business people are already familiar with that, but having all of this infrastructure built up for you, the ability to tap into the data sources that you already have in AWS, right? This is not new data.
Yep.
This is data that already exists for the customer. You just exposing it in such a way that your business users can really get some amazing value out of it without having to have an analyst or IT resources to necessarily build all this. It's pretty impressive.
Correct. And then you come in here and you have insights and anomaly detection, where you just click on this little light bulb and it's pointing out, hey, by the way, this is what we're seeing based off of anomaly detection and projections. Adding in projections is extremely simple. Like you can just come out in here on a typical graph and it usually has an add forecast. You can edit the forecast. Like if you wanted to, like a lot of business users in Excel, we'll go in and like calculate fields in Excel. So we'll put in like specific calculations, like pull this one field, divide it by this other.
Sure.
That can easily be just done by adding a calculated field. So there's no reason to go back to a engineer if all you're trying to do is take a field that already exists, divide it by another field. So I can take amount, subtract inventory level. I mean, we'd never do this, but
yeah,
just as an example. And I can save that as a new column. I can give it a name and I can save it as a new column. So a lot of the very basic use cases of, I just need this data, I need it quickly, I need to get it out. Technology and the IT department suddenly becomes enablers of business to move quickly, which is a really fun spot for technologists, because now we don't get bogged down with the, how do we make this graph meet the business specific requirements? And we get to play around with, hey, how do we make storefronts display properly and like make it possible for people to be able to find their inventory? How do we take some of the other technologies outside of analytics and focus on those? Because we've just handed off a whole burden of maintenance and management off to our business units to be able to iterate quickly. And now we can go back to what we'd really like to focus on, which is true innovation from moving our SaaS business forward, moving our core capabilities forward. while we've just enabled our business side and our sales teams to generate more revenue to fund those efforts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is really very neat stuff here, Nikoti. Certainly opening my eyes a little bit to the power of what the tool can do here. We are, let's see, we're at about the bottom of the hour. So those of you that may have joined us late or since we've started, this is Building SaaS on AWS, the SaaS Factory show for builders of SaaS here on Twitch. We are joined here today by Nikoti Keating, who is from SaaS Competency Partner, AWS SaaS Competency Partner, Trek 10. And we're talking about how Amazon QuickSight Q can be used as part of a SaaS solution to produce visualizations, data analytics, working with metrics. Very important concepts in SaaS. And this tool gives you just so much capability out of the box. It's quite amazing. So a question, or a couple of questions, I think are probably bubbling up in our audience's eyes, and I have as well. And the first one, I think, relates to cost. We talked about cost a little bit earlier. And QuickSight is currently in a pricing model that is a per user pricing model, correct? So you mentioned the cost associated with that, and that it's actually not a fixed cost. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think when I've talked to customers about QuickSight before, the cost question has always been kind of a blocker for them.
Yeah, no, and that's been one of those areas where, like, as I dived into it, it became fairly clear to me that if analytics and graphs are your main business use case, then the pricing of QuickSight becomes very daunting. And you start having to take a look to say, could I consume or could I use something else like Chart.js to offload some of this cost and really so that I can make a little bit more money? Because if I'm just getting going, QuickSight as my main method to generate revenue is just going to suck away a lot of my capabilities. And I wanted to pull this up. So if we take a look at user pricing, it's 30 cents per session with a max of $5 per month. And so if every time that a user goes in, you're going to get charged 30 cents, which means if, let's say, you're going to have a dashboard on your main page as soon as the user logs in, that's every user.
Right. And that's a continuous thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It becomes untenable very, very quickly. But let's say for every contract you put out there, analytics was designed for either the security department or management to be able to look at statistics, to be able to look at like how are things going. Then for every contract that you put together, you may have hundreds or thousands of users, let's just say in the enterprise that you sold your SaaS product to.
Right. Yeah.
But you only have like 2 users who are using analytics. Well, suddenly like $10 a month for that entire license that you're selling. And especially if you're like charging per user that could use the service.
Sure.
Well, that 30 cents per session suddenly becomes a lot more amenable.
And there is a max on, or a cap on the per user basis too. So that's something that you can always rely on, right? I think you mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah. And then the other side is like you can do session-based pricing as well, where you're going to reserve capacity from a session perspective. I think this is an area where the pricing itself pushes Amazon Q out of that general use case and more into a tailored use case, specifically targeting the management of the analytics to help the management of the SaaS customer or of your customer be able to pull in information and make decisions.
Right.
If the pricing were changed a little bit, I think it would become more of a core building block. Because, for example, with that customer where we saved them $500,000, part of that use case was the majority of their users had a need to access information, but not analytics. Meaning that
Right.
they needed information delivered down to them. They needed to be able to like look at that information, make decisions off that information. But it was more of like that immediate moment, what do I need to do next type information.
More of a
Whereas
let's hit the database, let's bring back a table of results versus these kind of analytical dashboards and analytical capabilities that QuickSight
and projections.
and
Yeah.
projections. Yeah.
And so that's part of that use case that like as you're thinking through like what is it that you're trying to accomplish, that's one of those pieces where it's going to fit into its own little piece. It might be smaller than you'd like it to be, but given how little effort goes into making this and to enabling your business side to run forward with it, it becomes a smaller investment to value gained. The other piece to this is, and this isn't a piece that we hit up so far, but QuickSight has the ability to generate email reports. So if on a monthly basis for SaaS stickiness, because stickiness is something that we all worry about in SaaS,
Absolutely.
is how much are we causing our customers to think about our product, which leads right back to renewals of our product, which we all like because we make money that way.
Yeah, we want to eliminate churn, right? If at all possible.
Exactly. And so you can come in to QuickSight and set up the ability for QuickSight to take some of these dashboards and send off emails to your customers from the analytics of these dashboards, which again can be set up by the business team, and it can also be set up via API. So you could have a set of email-based dashboards that automatically get sent off to the customer every single week or every single month. It's going to look better than you just kind of trying to whip together a quick email template.
Right.
It's one less thing for you have to worry about in terms of like scheduling those emails to go out. So it's going to scale.
And did it work? Did it not work? Were there bounces? You know, there's so much that comes with anybody that's ever had to do this in the past. You know, the pain that comes along with the scheduled reports.
Yeah. And so, and you're enabling your sales and your business team to like tweak all of this stuff to like get that right information off to your users. So all of those like nitty gritty details of like what's going to go into this email is something that you worry less about from a technologist perspective.
Yeah, because the business teams can make those decisions for themselves and test it, see the results, know exactly what it's going to look like for the customers before it goes out. And there's not the typical back and forth that has to happen between IT and the business to make the results that you're looking for. And if you are making those kinds of changes on a consistent basis, that eats up a lot of time. And of course, time equals money, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, technologist time eats up
Hugely
a lot
expensive.
more money if we're pulled away from stuff that is core to the business running,
right?
Versus stuff where it's like, hey, we need these tweaks, and something like you're switching contexts back and forth. It's just not as much fun.
Yeah, there's an opportunity cost there as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Not saying that analytics isn't fun. I enjoy analytics, but
so, you know, all of this is really great. And those of us that have been around AWS, I think we understand what QuickSight is capable of. We've seen these take place before. As you're introducing QuickSight to your customers, though, are you finding that they have any idea about what QuickSight is or how it works? Are they coming to this themselves? Or are you really just introducing this pretty much to most of your customers?
Typically, we're introducing it to our customers. Oftentimes, like it's almost like it's coming out of left field from their perspective of, hey, we want you to come in and like do this work, and we need these graphs, and we need, these
Right.
things pulled together.
They're
And
just
they're
thinking
just like,
about the
okay,
they're just thinking about the tasks that they've asked or that they need to have in their product, right? Yeah, and they want you to
correct.
build it. Yeah.
And this is part of the reason why people like to bring in Track 10 is they'll come up to Track 10 and say, hey, this is the business outcome we're trying to achieve. How do we do it? And that's one of the reasons why I really like this example of retail is this is the answer to the question, why should we invest in keeping our stores stocked with the right amount of inventory, and what
Mm-hmm.
inventory should we be stocking? So, for example, you could have trends that manifest in specific areas or regions of the country, and one
Right.
region might differ dramatically from another.
Absolutely.
If you're strictly going off of, hey, we're going to send, let's just say shirts, we're going to send small, medium, large, extra large, XXL of the same amount to all of our stores, or at least in the same percentage amounts to all of our stores, without leveraging analytics behind the scenes, you suddenly run into lost revenue because
Yeah.
one of those sizes gets sold out first.
Mm-hmm.
So by taking that and quantifying it down to a number, saying, hey, by the way, you have 50, so you're realizing 42,000 of sales in these 4 stores, but you're close to $17,000 that you're not
You're
capturing.
losing, right? Because you just don't have the inventory.
Correct. And by the way, retail loses over $300 billion due
Wow.
to stockouts every year.
Mm-hmm.
So not capturing this inventory is actually a big deal. And
Right.
so by leveraging QuickSight, by leveraging some of that forecasting, we can start advising our business customers on, by the way, if you adjust where you're sending your inventory and how much inventory you're not necessarily like sending to the store, but you're going to have warehouses across the country where you're storing the inventory. You don't want those warehouses always, fully consumed with inventory that's just sitting there. You want the stuff going in there and then being moved out as quickly as possible because that space costs you money. Knowing the right inventory that's going to move that needs to be close to the endpoint stores
Mm-hmm.
is a very similar problem to a CloudFront scenario where you're trying to get your data close to your end consumer.
Close to the customers. Yeah, that's true.
So
Well, and
it's
I
the
think
same problem.
you could find analogous problems in virtually every industry, right? I mean, these
Correct.
sorts of problems exist, and it's the operations. In this case, we're talking about the operations of a customer of the SaaS product itself, right? In
Yep.
this case, but even the SaaS solution provider are going to have these same sorts of issues that come up as well. Forecasting things like churn, right? We talked about churn earlier, and a good indication of churn is how often and how active your users are in your solution. You know, your tenants, how often
Yep.
they're using the solution, how often they're interacting with things. Are they continuously using the product? You know, all of these analytics stem from data that customers are already capturing. The question is, how do you get it visible into them? And this just, I mean, it seems like a bit of a no-brainer way to do this, assuming that you're falling under those categories where the costs are just not going to balloon out of control, right? Like you
Correct.
mentioned. So one thing that
Yeah.
I think does come up as well here is that, or that I've heard from customers, is that they view QuickSight as a tool, right? A separate tool that AWS provides that they can go in and certainly they can do analytics with. But what about actually embedding these visualizations and capabilities and having it as a part of the SaaS solution itself? Let's say you have an administration application either for the SaaS
Mhm.
provider or an admin application for the SaaS customers, the consumers. How
Yeah.
can we get these visualizations into those tools as well, or embedded into other applications?
Yeah, and AWS already has examples on how to do this. You still have that back and forth where you're going to Cognito, you're getting your login information. You're then able to use that to create a session with QuickSight, and you can either go through the API. So let's just say like you wanted to have your own visualizations because you wanted all your styling to look perfect. And in the same thing, you can go and grab the information from QuickSight and then display it yourself. Or QuickSight has the ability for you to leverage an iframe approach, where you set up that session. You can then point at specific dashboards and have those then pulled into your web page and rendered. But they'll still have that QuickSight look and feel.
Sure.
But the nice thing there is that you also get the ability to have your parameters still built in. So you don't have to build in the drop downs. You don't have to build in some of these other pieces. You can still get those embedded in your web page without you having to build that, or as they change, having to have technical people adjust that.
So there might be a little bit of a difference in the look and feel, right? Because it is being served by a completely different solution. Doesn't necessarily match what your page is, but the benefit is that you get all of those same capabilities. Everything that you put into that dashboard is there and available, or would be available inside of the embedded app.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know we're rapidly coming up on time. An hour goes by so fast, especially when it's really interesting, like we're seeing here. But Nakota, I think maybe what we should end with is, as you've been working through this and working with your customers and showing them the power of QuickSight and how they can leverage it for their SaaS businesses, what are some of the learnings or takeaways that you've gotten from your experience in using with it that maybe our customers here that are joining us might run into those landmines, so to speak?
So some of the first landmines is that just look at QuickSight and the IT's effort in QuickSight as the beginning of enablement. Yes, you can go through and put together entire QuickSight dashboards using infrastructure as code, but the documentation in that area and the amount of support AWS has in that area is fairly limited. And so I would say, from a QuickSight perspective, part of the way that I look at QuickSight is we're enabling the business side to leverage it as a tool. And so, having that shared responsibility line and figuring out where that shared responsibility line between IT and business ends allows IT to continually do infrastructure as code and leverage all the best practices and not get out of that habit. But it doesn't push you into the realm where you're churning your wheels so much, trying to build something that the documentation just isn't present, or is really hard to understand, or the data models are challenging to conceptualize and mentally model, and hand that off to your business unit. Your business unit's still going to have to test and make sure that everything's working as expected, but by leveraging some of the pieces, and I don't even think that we dived into this, but all that row level security stuff, the multi-tenancy stuff, is a single option down here that you can slam into every single data set that you put in.
So tenant ID is just a simple, thing that can be connected up to this throughout the entire process.
And it's not something that your business unit's going to break by putting together a new dashboard, right? Good and point. So you're creating all of the guardrails.
Because it's at the data set level and not at the dashboard level.
Correct. And so all those pieces that technologists really care about can happen before you get to the dashboarding stuff. it limits the type of issues that can come up, but you still have to do a little bit of testing. The other thing is just make sure that, like, as you're diving into this space, you should have a monetization model for analytics. Companies are definitely willing to pay. It's analytics is not expected, and you might even have something where instead of an analytics model, depending on the size of customers, you might have a data lake strategy where you sell that data, that usage data or the data that you're collecting for analytics purposes. You can sell that to the customer through, like, let's say, a lake formation approach, where the customer is just paying for access to the same information that you'd be using for analytics.
Yeah, that's really smart. I think that's a really key aspect to this, right? Is to have a monetization strategy around the analytics work that you're planning to do anyway, right? Yeah, it's almost a no-brainer. Well, Nakoti, we're rapidly approaching time here. I want to thank you again for coming on and talking about QuickSight with us. Nakoti and Trek 10, again, they are a SaaS competency partner, which means that they've undergone kind of a strict scrutiny of the SaaS factory to be a preferred partner for helping our AWS customers with their SaaS build-outs. And they can help you everywhere from the very beginnings of doing design and discovery all the way through build. Highly recommended, of course, Trek 10. If you are interested in talking to a partner about helping you, they are fantastic to work with. I put a link here in this slide. It's the last of the QR codes here, which is to Trek 10's website. Please reach out to them if you're interested. Nakoti, do you have anything that you've got coming up here soon where folks may be able to see you or meet you in person?
So we tend to try to be at the summits, and I'm planning on getting out to all the summits I can. We're doing a lot of the retail and financial services conference around the countries, mainly because those are two areas where we see Amazon really being able to impact and really being able to make big inroads in terms of how companies function. And with part of that, like, we're doing a lot in Gen AI, we're doing a lot with retail. We always love to talk to people about, how they can leverage AWS, how we can make it easier to tie the AWS stories and how to use AWS services back to those business outcomes. And so as we do this, if you're into the retail or financial service space, or any other space, I love to talk tech with everybody. But if you're in those two areas, we've been diving in. We've been looking at how to change the game when it comes to Gen AI and leveraging that to, for example, in retail, turn employees who are low trained employees into highly functional, very knowledgeable employees, leveraging Gen AI to augment them. For example, if you walk into a tech store and you're like, what's the difference between these two cameras? And you've seen the employees pick up the two boxes.
The glass look.
Yeah. Well, you throw Gen AI behind that, and you can do this in SaaS as well. Like, you start giving them not only this is the differences, but here's corporates, or here's our centralized knowledge of which one fits which use case the best.
Yeah.
And you can open up all sorts of doors. And, as you look at SaaS models, most SaaS is answering the question of how do we enable customers to do more by knowing less.
Absolutely.
We're going to fill in this gap for you. So can we give you models that allow you to become those experts in this space without the training? And I think that's a question that a lot of SaaS companies can also leverage.
Absolutely. So, yes, reach out to Nakoti and Trek 10. I'm sure they'd be glad to help you out. AWS also, can assist. We have a lot of programs to assist with cost related to working with our partners too. So don't let that necessarily be a barrier to you. Please reach out if you have interest in working with us and our competency partners further. Nakoti, thank you so much for being here today and talking about Amazon QuickSight with us. And to all of our audience out there, have a good rest of your week. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks again on Building SaaS on AWS. Until then, happy building, everybody. Thank you, Nakoti.
Thanks.